Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Bird's Eye View with Mirror Simon Bird. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and we've got plenty to talk about when it comes to Newcastle United. A defeat to Fulham has exposed what we already knew about United this season. They've been pretty poor, and the chance to redeem themselves via the League Cup at AFC Wimbledon was taken away as the game was cancelled thanks to flooding. Is that a blessing in disguise? Perhaps not, but we'll get on to that. We've got plenty of questions as well sent in by you guys to answer, as well as focusing on one of the big talking points of this week, the mood and body language of some of United's biggest stars, primarily Anthony Gordon. You can send your questions and thoughts to the IBW podcast at reachplc.com. Let's get on with the show. Simon, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Very good, thank you. Yeah, a little week off or midweek off last week, so that was all very refreshing. Good fun. So, but back to a very disappointing result at the weekend. Kind of a bit demoralising after all the talk before the match of Newcastle going top of the Premier League after 5 games, and they could have taken top spot after a decent results-wise start to the season, but it didn't happen, did it? Wasn't good.
It didn't. I mean, you've had the joys of cycling around Europe for 4 days, the highs of that, some beautiful views, and then you've come back to the doom and gloom of Newcastle United.
Yeah, we hit the heights in the French Pyrenees, but then Newcastle didn't hit the heights of the Premier League, unfortunately. So yeah,
look at that one, ladies and gents. He's been saving that for the last few days. Not scripted at all.
Not scripted at all. No. Peak performance, etc. But yeah, there we go. It didn't work for Newcastle. I mean, did we expect it to work? I mean, did you? I thought it was a bit premature when everyone was writing and getting excited on Saturday morning about getting top of the league, and when we'd actually seen how Newcastle had functioned and played as an outfit. It seemed like there was two different stories being told by the results and by the performances, and people who had watched them, like myself and all the fans and you, all season, didn't really match the two up and sort of potentially going top of the league on Saturday.
Yeah, it would have been a false narrative, wouldn't it? I think we would have just been waiting for the wheels to come off because it was unsustainable, picking up points as they did, but performing so badly. And in many ways, I'm going to use the term again, blessing in disguise. Maybe the defeat to Fulham is a blessing in disguise because it means that the issues have to be solved. You can't kick them down the road anymore, as we have been doing, as Eddie Howe perhaps has been doing in the opening 4 games of the Premier League season, because he's been picking up wins and people have turned around and said, "Oh, what does it matter? They're third in the league and what have you." Whereas now, obviously, they dropped down the table a little bit. Still a good start of the season, but there's not that comfort blanket of picking up points when playing poorly. So it would have been good, Simon, to have gone down to Wimbledon with a chance to redeem themselves, pick up 3 points, hopefully get a bit of momentum heading into Saturday. It's obviously not going to happen. You are listening and watching this on Wednesday morning. We would love to have broadcast this, knowing that Newcastle win the next round of the Cup. But as we said, the game has been cancelled due to flooding. I mean, it's pretty unprecedented, that, isn't it? I mean, I've not known something like this before. I mean, they may have been cancelled because of illness or what have you, but even that's a rarity. I mean, the images, Simon, of Plough Lane, or I think it's Red Cherry Records or Cherry Red Records Stadium due to sponsorship, it's quite something.
Yeah, I mean, sinkholes in the pitch and like flooding. And my boss, obviously, my bosses all live in London, and they said it's been remarkable. Sort of 48 hours before the game was that last at the weekend, basically Saturday and Sunday, it's absolutely lashed it down in London. Real storms, and it is weird that, I mean, we were all on the way to the press conference on Monday, halfway there, and then you get the text alert from the Newcastle comms people saying that it's sorry, a little phone call, saying that it's all off, and the game's been cancelled, and it's kind of, it is strange, but I mean, you can't help it. I mean, if the storms can't be coped with by the pitch or the surrounds of the ground, then what can you do? It's got to be postponed, and I mean, it's not ideal for Newcastle that they could have got this game out of the way, hopefully progressed in the Cup. It's got to be rearranged now, and they're not. It's not like a packed schedule like they had last year with Europe to fit it in. But it's a bit of it's a bit of a problem that they've had to postpone it. Although I think Eddie Howe might see it as a good thing that he's now got a week to sort the issues out he needs to sort out and get a game plan ready for the weekend and the big one against Man City. So
I think the issue with reorganiser probably comes from Wimbledon's side of things, because they're obviously playing midweek as well as on the weekend. So their schedule is absolutely packed. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Maybe Newcastle United just get a buy into the next round. But it's interesting that you mentioned Eddie Howe's thoughts on it, Simon, because I think some would say what you actually want is you want the next game to come around thick and fast, even though he was likely to make changes, but you just want to be able to rid that memory of Craven Cottage as soon as possible. You don't want to be kind of sitting and letting it stew. And as you've said there, others might take it as a boost, as a bonus, and it means Newcastle do have a full week to work on a game plan against Manchester City. I'm kind of in the middle. Newcastle and Eddie Howe have had time to work on things. So far this season, they've had clear weeks, and it just hasn't happened. So is another clear week going up against an opponent like Manchester City really going to make all that much difference? I'm not too sure.
Well,
maybe a comfortable win against, although lower league opposition, maybe would have been a little bit more of a boost than having a clear run at Man City this week.
Well, I'm erring towards it being a good thing. I think, theoretically you'd want to get the game out of the way, play it, make changes, win it. But I think in the circumstances, with the issues that Eddie's got to deal with this week, I think there'll be some tough talking on the training ground Monday, Tuesday. I think you'll be getting into them, like properly getting into them. There's personalities there that need shaking up. There's attitudes that need sorting out. There's team chemistry that's missing, and I think he might use the next couple of days, despite the half decent results-wise start to the season. I think he might use it as a bit of a reset and a bit of thinking time and a bit of self-reflection for a lot of the players, really. And he'll be asking them some really tough questions in the next couple of days. And I think it's easier for him to ask those questions and come to a solid game plan and first 11 for the Man City game when you haven't got a game in the way, and when you can give them Wednesday off. You can train Monday, Tuesday, give them Wednesday off to let things settle, then positively build on Thursday and Friday to the Man City game. I think in hindsight, having that game postponed on Tuesday night last night was a good thing. And I don't think it'll be a comfortable time at the Newcastle training ground in the next couple of days. I think players have got to come together and sort things out. They've got to have some harsh words between themselves. And I think Eddie Howe's got to have some pretty tough words with them as well. And then Eddie Howe's got to show a clear direction. And one of the biggest questions, I mean, we'll talk about individuals later, but the biggest question he's got to answer this season is, what is his best first 11? What is his first 11? What is his best 11? Who plays right back? Who plays left back? Who plays left wing? Who plays left midfield? Who plays right wing? And I don't think any of us know, possibly even Eddie Howe, because players haven't stepped up to the mark yet, what the best first 11 is. And that's kind of that's a bit unsettling 5-6 games into the season.
No, I agree. I think he's got to just believe in his choice as well. We've seen too many changes over the last few games, and then changes at half time as well. One thing that Eddie Howe always had was that he kind of always stuck to his guns, and maybe that's not been apparent in the opening weeks of the season. You mentioned there, the attitude and the body language, and that's really what we're going to focus on. And in primarily one man that we are going to talk about is Anthony Gordon, because most of the questions that came in were about Anthony Gordon and how he just doesn't look happy. His body language looks totally off. And, there's plenty of reasons why that could be. I mean, do you, first of all, Simon, do you see what our audience sees when you watch Newcastle United play? Does Anthony Gordon look like someone who just is not happy at the moment?
Well, he does. It depends what you mean by what happy. So he doesn't look happy, and his body language, especially in that first half, didn't look good. And he wasn't the only one, but he's now become such a player of such stature, playing on the left wing for England, wanted by Liverpool, which we'll touch on in a minute. That his performances are being analysed far greater than they were when he was at Everton before he made the move. Before he had that brilliant season last year, where he got 10, 11 goals, 10, 11 assists in the Premier League in 35 games. So he's now a player of the stature where people are looking at him to provide inspiration and leadership, even though he's only 22, for Newcastle, and he's a big player in this team. So is that? I mean, we've seen this before, haven't we? We saw it early on in his Newcastle career when he was a substitute, and Eddie Howe hauled him off at Brentford a couple of seasons ago, and he did the whole shake the manager off thing, and he clearly wasn't happy, and he kind of turned. That was a turning point, looked to be a turning point in his career, and he knuckled down and became kind of really serious and kind of kept his head down and just played and did brilliantly the next season. So we know he's got it. We've seen early on that he has kind of the strop in him. Now, there wasn't like an outright strop on in the first half the other day, but this has been like brewing. So I watched him in games early in the season, and he's really demanding. He's really kind of criticizing Lewis Hall, who he's trying to form a kind of link with and a partnership with down that left, and Lewis Hall kind of doesn't give him the ball. He wants it, and there's kind of very obvious lashback at the left back. So there has been indications that he's not being happy. Now, some of the things that happened in the first half last week, I just watched the highlights back this morning again, just to check certain things. There was one time where Gordon was sauntering back into the box. Lloyd Kelly got the ball. Lloyd Kelly had no options on in an unpressurized left back situation. He wanted to play it up the wing. Gordon wasn't up the wing, but he jogged back into the Newcastle's box. Lloyd Kelly gave him it inside, and Gordon just swiped his foot at it and gave it straight back to Fulham. Really poor. It wasn't a clearance. It was just basically a pass to the Fulham midfield. Fulham then had a dangerous shot. Got a dangerous shot off. That looked really sloppy. And that wasn't like the Anthony Gordon that comes out and busts a gut for England, or was herring round for Newcastle leading the press 2 seasons ago. That was like it was just sloppy, slovenly, disinterested play. And I bet that's been played back to him this week. That kind of stuff can't happen. That's not the standards that Newcastle United have set a year ago, and the season before that as well. It was really surprising. Now we should go into why is that happening? It could be frustration that the whole team dynamic isn't kind of flowing, and that he's not happy in that. There are other players. I mean, if you look at Isak's reaction, he was fuming with Shah when Shah won the ball and then missed the chance because he didn't square it. Even like 10 seconds after, he had rage in his face. He was shouting at Shah. So that there's two schools of thought on Anthony Gordon here. He's had his head turned by Liverpool. He hasn't got his new contract offer yet from Newcastle, or he's not discussing it. And he wants a massive pay rise, and he sees Liverpool as an out in January or the summer. Now, has his head been turned? Only Anthony Gordon can explain that, and he's not given an interview yet this season to explain it. Or is Anthony Gordon now instead demanding of his teammates? Does he want better? He wants better from himself, I'm sure, but is he wanting better from them? And it's all part of like the kind of team process that Gordon is shouting and demanding and rattling cages. And that's part of being a leader. You've got to do that if you're a leader. Is he doing that in a positive way to demand and get people playing better around him? Or is he doing it in a I'm too good for this kind of way? I can go to Liverpool. I'm going to march off, and I've got offers elsewhere, and I'm too big for this place. Kind of thing. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. It's probably a bit extreme, but is that the thought process? And you're debating which one of those things it is. But it hasn't been good. Anthony Gordon improved in the second half, didn't he? He got a couple of breakaways. He clearly he'd cleared his head or had a rollicking. They probably all had a rollicking at half time from Eddie Howe to raise their standards. And he did look a bit better in the second half, a bit more the player that we want him to. But it is a debate, massive debate amongst the fans. It's not media creating it. If you look on Twitter, it's fans seeing what we're seeing and wondering, what's going on there.
And we'll get on to the kind of relationships on the pitch in a moment, because we had quite a few questions sent in about that as well, regarding how Eddie Howe was changing his side that often, how are players meant to be forming these partnerships, which are the foundations for a successful team. But just on why Gordon is at the moment looking very unhappy, you mentioned there the interest from Liverpool in the summer. Now, obviously, there's various stories of what actually happened. Did Newcastle offer Gordon to Liverpool? Didn't they? How serious was the inquiry, etc., etc. But do you think he feels loved in Newcastle United? Because let's, for instance, say that 100% he was offered to Liverpool. He gets a text off his agent while he's in the England camp saying, this has happened. There's a chance you might have to have a medical, etc., etc. Doesn't happen. We know it's his boyhood club. You can't blame him in many ways if his head has been turned, and then he's been a little bit angry at A, the deal not coming off, but then B, same with there. I was player of the season last season. You've just offered me up to Liverpool. Now Newcastle might come back and say, well, that didn't actually happen. But I think the big question is, do you think he feels loved at Newcastle United, or do you think he feels a little bit hurt about how the summer went? And I guess you could also maybe, Simon, throw in the fact that there was no big money signing. So he's not only asking the question about his future, he's also saying, well, we're there. I'm looking at Aston Villa, I'm looking at other teams strengthening, and that hasn't happened here either.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two elements to it, isn't there? Does he feel loved? Well, he's got a contract at Newcastle till January 26. So Newcastle are going to have to get their skates on, and it is a priority. We know it's a priority for the club to renew his deal. Now, if they're going to renew Anthony Gordon's deal, I don't know what he's on now, but he's a £40 million signing. He's probably in the region of 100 grand a week, maybe a bit less. Now, there are people at Newcastle, possibly Tonali, who's on 9 million a year. 170 grand a week seems to be Newcastle's kind of ceiling at the minute, which is a lot of money. Now, if Anthony Gordon's one of the main players in the team that they're relying on and wanting to deliver, and he did deliver last season every week, then it's only natural that a player with a short career is going to say, right, I want £9 million a year. He's a £9 million player, £9 million player for Newcastle now, because he's one of the leading lights. And when players are comparing salaries, they roughly know what each other is on, and they know their stature and worth in the team. And if they think that's undervalued, then they're going to be a little bit unhappy, and they're going to want that rectified straight away, either with a new contract, which they can sign, or you get out and you get a new pay deal elsewhere. You get sold, and I mean, if you go to Liverpool or one of the top four, we've discussed this in the past before, written about it, that Newcastle can't offer the pay deals that Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal offer. They're way behind. They're like the stars will be earning double what Newcastle's best players are earning. So Newcastle aren't in that salary bracket at the minute because they can't afford it. So that leaves them vulnerable to players like Gordon being lured away. Now, the Liverpool links is interesting. It's his hometown. It probably would be a dream club to play for. He'll be thinking, I would have thought he'll be thinking, I've got more chance of winning something at Liverpool. It's a bad thing to say as a Newcastle correspondent and someone who cares about the club, but you've got more chance of winning a trophy if you go to Liverpool. That's what players want as well. They want money, they want trophies, they want optimism and a future at the biggest club they can possibly get. Newcastle, if they're not moving quickly enough in terms of signing players, they haven't signed a big player in two windows. Anthony Gordon might be thinking this club has reached its plateau for a few years. It's not going anywhere. I've got more chance of winning trophies elsewhere, and all those things. That's only we don't know what the players are thinking really privately in their own heads, but you can put yourself in their position, and that's exactly what you'd be thinking if you're Anthony Gordon. Harsh realities of football, business, money, and winning trophies. So yeah, there are all those factors in the Anthony Gordon situation.
But getting a new contract on the table for him is still the right course of action for Newcastle United, isn't he? I mean, I've seen people, Simon, this weekend saying that, if a club offered £70 million for Gordon, they would snap their hand off for it, which I think is absolutely crazy. His body language isn't the best, and he hasn't started the season at the height of last season, but last campaign, he was Newcastle's best player. He's worth at least 100 million in my view. So I think they need to get that new deal sorted, reward them for last season, protect their value as well if Liverpool come back in the summer. And, I think that's what they need to do. I don't think just because he started the season poorly that any chance of a new deal has gone out the window. I think you need to keep your best players here at the club. So get the deal sorted.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in that, like selling Anthony Gordon and buying a new player, even if you get a load of money for him, is a risk. So you don't. It's easier to turn Anthony Gordon's disappointing in our view form at the moment. It's easier to turn that form around and get him firing again like he was last season and a main player than it is to sell Anthony Gordon, bring a replacement in, make him part of your system. Hopefully he's going to be better than Anthony Gordon. A replacement would be better than Anthony Gordon because that's what you're all about in progressing a football. Doing that, there's a lot of risky elements in doing that than Eddie Howe making Anthony Gordon an even better player, an England regular, and keeping him at the club on an improved new contract. So the non-risky path is to just get him back to last season's form and get better players around him so he's happier. That's the non-risky bit to do. But it means spending in January and spending in the summer so that the whole thing comes together. It does feel like the club's at a bit of a crossroads now. They've had the 2 years of building and optimism, and they've hit a bit of a plateau. I don't think they've been worked out, but I think Eddie Howe needs to refresh things, find something different in his squad, re-engage the energy and chemistry that they had, and also he's not been helped out in the last. Eddie Howe and the club have not moved on in the transfer window and this is what happens when you don't sign players consistently, improving your squad every window. It goes a bit stale, and the squad dynamic, the players are the same players. They've not got a new man around them, a new big star to impress. When a new star walks into a dressing room, all the players want to impress him. They're working him out, saying, "Is he any good? Come on, show us what you've got." And they're also trying to gain the respect of the new star signing. And that's not happened for 2 windows at Newcastle. It's the same bunch of players. If you're sitting in a room or traveling everywhere, playing every day with the same bunch of people, there's going to be kind of tensions and kind of, little narcs develop amongst a group of, big egos and big star footballers. So you've got to have that constant refreshing. Newcastle haven't had that, and that kind of is manifesting itself now, I think.
Because the players do notice that sort of thing. It does affect them. I mean, Malcolm MacDonald always tells a story about when Joe Harvey rocked into the dressing room and said, "I've signed the man who's going to fire the bullets for you." And it was Terry Hibbett. And he said, Joe Harvey then walked out the room and he said, everyone just turned to one another and just went, "Wow, that is a signing." And that might have been 40 odd years ago, but it's still the same impact in a dressing room today. And to go 2 windows without a big marquee signing will definitely be noticed. I guess, as well as maybe questioning what's going to happen in the next few windows, if that deal was on the table, Anthony Gordon, new contract, he will be saying, are we going to sign X, Y, Z? Are we going to move forward in the transfer market? He'll also be asking about his own position in the team, because at the moment it feels like Eddie Howe is trying to accommodate both him and Harvey Barnes, but he just can't do that. They're both brilliant on the left, not so good on the right. And for me, Gordon up top just doesn't work, as I've said many times. But it looks like in the eyes of Howe, and I think maybe in the eyes of the majority of Newcastle United fans, certainly given the goals Barnes has scored of late, that Harvey Barnes is the number 1 pick there. So where does Gordon go? Because I can understand from his point of view. He says, look at all the goals I scored last season. Look at the assists I had last season from the left. That was my position. I was brilliant. Now you either put me on the right, or if I'm starting on the left, I'm getting switched out to the right halfway through, or I'm playing through the middle. I am a left winger. I've proven myself. Why is Harvey ahead of me? And I can totally understand that from Gordon's point of view. He'll be asking those questions. He'll not be getting the answer that he wants. He certainly won't be getting any guarantees. And I can see why he might be a little bit put out by that.
Yeah, you can. But you could also say, Harvey Barnes is the Newcastle top scorer, and every time he's come on, he's pretty much conjured a brilliant finish and shown the way and rescued Newcastle with some great goals this year. So he is delivering. He's coming on and he's delivering. And it's so Eddie Howe he needs to. This is the problem. It was a good signing, Harvey Barnes, but you did think, well, they've signed another left winger for 35 million, and they've also got Anthony Gordon. So what's going on there? And I think you've got to get Harvey Barnes into the team. I mean, whether he's a super sub and he comes on fresh and he gets more room because of that, Eddie Howe's got to work out, or whether he can deliver from the starting position. We don't know what his fitness for 90 minutes is. But yeah, Anthony Gordon will be wondering, well, it is a bit unsettling for a player when you think you're a left winger, that's your best position, and then you get used as a central striker, because he's a very mobile, elusive central striker, is Anthony Gordon. And on the right, I don't think he's as effective on the right, but he could be. I mean, he could work at that position and make it his own. So, or do you change formation and play him as play Gordon or Barnes as a number 10 and have 4-2-3-1 and have a more of a solid kind of midfield 2 shielding, and then a really attacking front 4? They're the questions Eddie Howe's asking. But it is unsettling for Gordon that he's not just the left winger now and that's it. And it's all getting, there's multiple halftime substitutions. He substituted 5 people in the last 2 half times, which shows that the first team that he's picked hasn't really worked out. So yeah, these are big questions for Eddie Howe. Anthony Gordon is the left winger. He's probably Newcastle's number 1 left winger. But then Harvey Barnes is knocking on the door saying, I've scored, was it 5 goals this year? 4 goals? He's right up there in the scoring charts, 4 goals. He's played so well, he's got to be in the team. So somehow. So what do you do? I mean, you say to Anthony Gordon, I'm still picking you as the left winger. You got to get a goal. You got to get goals, assists. Or do you say, let's vary it and play you on the right wing? Very difficult decision. It's probably one of those positions where Newcastle have got proper strength and depth, and you've got 2 players really vying to be out on the left wing. It's a good thing. I mean, it's a good headache. It's one of those good headaches. Yeah, one of those managerial cliches that they use from time to time. But unsettling, yes. If Anthony Gordon's getting shunted around different positions, that can't be helping his mindset.
Exactly. It's a test of his character, isn't it? And you mentioned just before that you wouldn't be surprised if the mistake that Anthony Gordon made in the Fulham game was replayed to him. But I look at Gordon, I just think potentially he's a bit of a ticking time bomb. You referenced what happened at Brentford a couple of seasons back. So I'm just wondering how you think Eddie Howe will be handling Anthony Gordon at the moment, in terms of the message when it comes to the first team and where he plays, but also the message about what he's not doing right on the pitch. And there are quite a few examples of that, as you've referenced, because it's got to be handled very delicately.
Yeah, I think probably Howe does need to address body language issues. I mean, body language is like an easy thing. It's kind of like a undefinable thing to say what the impact is. But you can spot when players are in the zone, they're focused, there's no criticism of teammates, and they're just on it. And they make a mistake and they just get on it, no one's criticizing. And then you can actually see when there's a bit of discord and when it's not gelling, and they're kind of at each other a little bit. Now, I don't mind people being at each other if there's a leader and there's a captain who is dishing it out, like Roy Keane used to rattle his teammates, or Alan Shearer could step in and say, and his words were like powerful. And if he had a pop at you, you couldn't backchat. You had to just follow, right? Now, I don't know if Newcastle have got a character like that at the minute who would be in charge of kind of the dressing room and sorting these issues out. Trippier has had the captaincy taken off him, which hasn't gone down well, changed the dynamic. Is Bruno going to go around dishing it out and telling people to raise their games? And is it going to have the same weight as captains of old at the club? I don't know. I don't think so. I think Bruno's more of a leader by example. So there is going to, the body language thing's got to have to be addressed this week, in that it doesn't look good to the fans. It doesn't look good when players are moaning and don't seem to be on the same page. I think there's you've got to put on an outward show of unity, even if your mate's making a mistake, an honest mistake. You can't criticize it. You've just got to, you've got to get. I mean, you look at when Nick Pope on Saturday palms it into his own net. That's a mistake. That's a really poor thing from Nick Pope. And if you look at the shots of it, Anthony Gordon's turning his back, going, he's not happy. Now, Nick Pope's made a mistake. Anthony Gordon and others will make mistakes. You possibly need to keep that kind of emotion inside and use it differently than expressing frustration on the pitch. So that probably needs to be addressing that chemistry amongst the lads. The first team needs to be sorted out, really. I think. I mean, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't, like, it gets fans debating. It then gets fans debating, issues and who's playing badly, and rather than thinking we're winning as a team and we're failing as a team, which is another thing which managers always say.
Because of course it wasn't just Anthony Gordon whose body language looked off. But before we get to a few other players and just kind of elaborate on the point you just made about the team as a whole, what is the solution to Anthony Gordon? How do you fix a problem like Anthony Gordon? What does Eddie Howe have to do over the next few days and over the next few weeks to get Anthony Gordon back to the level of last season?
Well, Eddie's got a lot of managerial techniques, and I think initially people thought he was quite gentle and a bit soft, and kind of a guy who communicates with players and talks them through what's happening. And I think probably that'll have to happen with Gordon. I mean, he might have him into his. I mean, he apparently speaks to people all the time in his office, and he's got a very open door policy. And so I don't think it'll be like, not showdown talks or anything like that. I think Eddie Howe has a constant dialogue with everyone. And I do think, he might need to speak to Gordon about being he's 22, but being more of a leader, being more positive with teammates, showing in his actual play what he can deliver for Newcastle, and not showing so much frustration with the situation that the teammates on the pitch, or expressing it differently. I think that's what you'd be doing with Anthony Gordon. You might do it in a general sense, or you might have the player in for the whole team, or you might have individual players in. But it's one of those things that needs addressing to kind of change the narrative around the club. I mean, Eddie Howe spoke a couple of weeks ago about changing the narrative about around the transfer window, and throwing his arms around the players and showing them all love, and saying, no matter what's going on elsewhere, we're together, we're this unit, and we're fighting against the world. That's the kind of attitude that he's been talking about over the last couple of weeks. Now, I don't know who they're fighting against, because there's not that many people against them, but it's a managerial technique to say, look, the world's against us. They've not signed us any players. We've got this guy coming saying we've got to be elite when we've already finished fourth. Talking about Mitchell. And basically, we're the ones delivering it. We're going to enjoy this training pitch. We're going to be together. And that's the kind of narrative that Eddie Howe's kind of trying to create around the team at the minute. Now they've got to start showing that. They've got to start showing that they are a band of brothers again, and that they're tight, and they're fighting for each other, and they're running for each other. They're not running for each other. I mean, they're sauntering around. They won't backtrack. There's elements of not backtracking. They're not fighting to help their teammate out, like bailing each other out like they were a year and a half ago. That's all got to return. They've got to start being a band of brothers again, and saying, yeah, we're not all perfect, but we've got to start fighting. And that's the kind of gelling that they need to do at the minute. I mean, we're talking like this. It's not a disaster, They've had a few bad games where they've been undercut par, but they've still got points on the board. So they're close, but it needs tweaking.
It does. And again, I go back to the point that it's not the end of the world, but it's also not sustainable to continue to play in the manner that they have been doing all season, even though they've picked up points. And we said that it's not just Gordon with the injury of body language. You can pick on Joe Linson, you can pick on Bruno, you can pick the majority of players who featured on Saturday did not look very happy. Obviously they always put 100% in, but across the field, where was the reaction for each of the goals? You're right. Where was the running over to Nick Pope and giving him a pat on the back saying, don't worry about it, head up? There was none of that. And every time the goal went in, it was arms in the air, or like you say, they turned the back on the net. And you don't want to see that. You want to see a reaction. You watch the Arsenal Man City game when Arsenal conceded very late on, and everybody was down. But then you had Declan Rice. He picks up the ball. He's trying to, G everybody up and saying, come on, we've still got 30 seconds here. That's what you need. You need that leader. That's what Declan Rice does. That's what 120 million pounds gets you, whatever much he cost. Did Newcastle United show that on Saturday? They didn't. As soon as the first goal went in, heads were down, and you could just see what was going to happen. Everything that we talked about in the weeks earlier, the mistakes, it was going to come home to roost, and it did. And yeah, I agree with you. You do wonder where that leadership is. And one of the questions we've got, Simon, is on the captaincy. Ryan on Twitter has asked, is the captaincy too much of a burden on Bruno, which is hindering his performance? Because he has not looked like the Bruno of last season. I mean, when he needed to avoid that yellow card, he was so focused and he was brilliant for, what was it, 11, 12 games? His game went up a level. And Newcastle weren't necessarily playing well in that time either, but he was doing really well. He
Yeah,
looks like he's gone down a level, and I don't. Is it down to the captaincy? I would hope not, because that would be quite concerning in many ways. I think when it comes to Bruno's character and what have you. I don't know. Is he just out of form? What's your
it's
view
strange.
on it?
It's strange we're having this conversation because I think the reason Eddie Howe gave Bruno the captaincy was to get another 10% out of him. You know, to get something extra and to keep him engaged and keep him thinking his career is progressing. He's now captain of a huge football club. I mean, Bruno's form does fluctuate, and I mean, he kind of bossed games, and you couldn't press him because he'd wriggle out of situations and then pass it. And I think he's not quite in that rhythm at the moment. He's not quite, but it's all tiny margins, isn't it? Because maybe he hasn't got the runners around him, or he's getting overloaded in midfield and doesn't know who to track coming through. So players look better in better teams, and it's all about everyone just making that little percentage step up. I don't know if Bruno is he's a great talker. We've interviewed him loads of times after the games, and he'll come out, he'll take responsibility for things. But it's strange having, God, I don't know, it's kind of xenophobic saying this a little bit, but I don't know whether a foreign Brazilian captain works for a Premier League club. I think, like, when you've got Kieran Trippier, who's kind of the English focus of an English club and can express himself in that way and have authority because he's been around the game so long. I think you miss something if Kieran Trippier is not the leader and he's not playing week in, week out. Eddie Howe's probably taking the captaincy off him because he can't guarantee Kieran Trippier is going to start every week, and he wanted to give it to someone, the club captaincy to someone who, the team captaincy to someone who is going to be playing every week, and Bruno is. So he's kind of a leader with the fans and around the club, and he conducts himself as a captain, and he expresses himself really well. But I kind of see a captain. My kind of captain would be someone who has ultimate authority, who's a little bit intimidating, but can manage situations in a clever way as well. Who can pull players aside and they'll listen to him. And I don't know. I'm not sure if Bruno's got that stature in the team. I'm not. Other people will know better. Eddie Howe's probably wanting that to develop. But I'd have a different kind of captain. I think towards
the end of last season, he was kind of captain without the armband, and I was really pleased when he got the captaincy because I thought it would work really well. He does drive the team forward, but maybe the responsibility that comes with the armband, he has been overwhelmed by it, and it is really interesting that you talk about, you mentioned Alan Shearer before, you mentioned Roy Keane, two fantastic captains of their respective teams. I think I say this just having talked about Roy Keane, but with Bruno, you always feel he's always one word or one feisty challenge on him away from kicking someone or getting himself sent off. And as captain, you need to have that discipline. I know Roy Keane every now and then let his mask slip and he would do something a little bit daft. But has Bruno got the self-discipline to be the captain? There was times last season where you look around and you're thinking, why isn't someone having a word with him? He's on a yellow or he's done this, he's done that. Someone needs to go over and have an arm on the shoulder and just say, just calm down, let your feet do the talking rather than you. But now that's him. He's in that role. He's the man who has to go over and just say to whoever, let's calm down, man. I don't know. Maybe it's not the right position for him.
Dynamic. Yeah, I mean the kind of captain. I mean, a captain is really the manager's the extension of a manager on the field, which Keane was under Ferguson. And the doubt I have about Bruno, and it's up to him to prove this wrong or to say that it's wrong, is that I don't see him, and I don't know if we need to find out if this happens, but I don't see him as someone who can go around and like dish it out amongst his teammates. I think he could have positive words and he can tell them they're great, but I think you need both elements, and I don't both elements in your character. And he's like when you're a captain, you're a manager of players as well. So Kieran Trippier, I can imagine him arm around the shoulder, having words with everybody in that team, and having an opinion on what's happening here, what's happening there, and him being listened to by everybody. With Bruno, I don't know. I don't think he is the kind of man who is Eddie Howe's extension on the pitch. He's not an extension of Eddie Howe. Can Eddie Howe walk into give the players, say they've had a bad first half? Sometimes manager will hang back and let the players sort it out amongst themselves. So let's see what they've got. Let's see individually what they've got to sort this out, and then he'll come in with some tactical points. Now, if you let them stew for 7 minutes, first 7 minutes of the half time, would Bruno be standing in front of that group and giving a managerial style team talk to individuals, dishing it out, giving encouragement, whatever, guidance, and have the authority to do that as captain at the minute, which would help Eddie Howe, compared with what Kieran Trippier could deliver in a similar situation as captain, or Alan Shearer or Roy Keane? I don't know. I think Bruno's more of an individual and more of a personality who can lead on the pitch, but isn't your kind of player manager off the pitch.
Does it highlight that Newcastle haven't maybe got those options within the team and within the squad? We know they've said goodbye to the likes of Matt Ritchie, who was never going to be first team, but obviously offered that kind of vocal point. And you look around at teams who are dominating now, they have leaders, and we've mentioned Declan Rice. You've got Martin Odegaard as well, and you've got other players on the Arsenal side who if harsh words need to be said, they'll be saying it. You look back to the team with Alan Shearer, Rob Lee, Gary Speed, players who, again, you didn't just have one person prepared to say it, you had two or three, and you've mentioned various other examples as well. Have Newcastle United got that? Because I look around the first 13, 14, 15 names on the squad list, and I think, have they got it? Dan Burn knows what it means to be captain. That's his dream. He's a boyhood fan. But is it? Or maybe Newcastle United too nice? Are all the players too kind? I mean, it's been a big point, hasn't it, that they've lost that nastiness? Have they got the players in that squad who are prepared to get in the faces of their own teammates and say, you need to pull your weight, you need to track back? Because again, we mentioned Gordon not necessarily doing the work on Saturday, and you look at all the goals they conceded. Not tracking back was a big part of them 3 goals. Where is the person? I'm not necessarily saying do it on the pitch, but behind closed doors, and this might well happen. We don't know. We're not there. But if it has happened, it's not had the desired impact. So have Newcastle got the players where they're not afraid to get in the faces of their own teammates and say, you need to improve because you're not doing what the manager's asked, you're not doing what the manager's asked, and it's costing them.
I don't think if you go through that squad, the personalities in it, we only see a slice of their personalities, so they might be very different in private and in a team environment, but the personalities who shine out are kind of Trippier, and then Nicky Pope. I don't see him as a leader. Dan Burn would be the most obvious one if he's in team regularly to be one of the vocal guys who can do that job, of a traditional job of a captain. So Dan Burn would be number one, who's starting, or Trippier. And then you look at the rest of them, and the others are too young. Lewis Hall, you're going to expect him to talk, but he's not going to lead. He's fighting for his place. Lloyd Kelly is fighting for his place. Livramento might develop, but he seems really quiet. Sven Botman, we've hardly spoken a word to him. Brilliant on the pitch, but he seems like a cool, calm, silent guy who gets on with his job rather than a captain. And Fab Shah, similar, does his job, but doesn't seem to be a shouter or a vocal guy, kind of just gets on with his job. Joe Linton, maybe Joe Linton could. Joe Willock, no. You go through Sean Longstaff, local lad, but he's not going to start dishing it out to Bruno and all the others. So you look at, and Isaac seems to be, he's a goal scorer, but he's not the stature of a captain. So they perhaps do lack captains. The ideal manager says the ideal situation is the manager says captaincy doesn't matter because we've got 10 captains on the pitch and we're all leaders. And I think that maybe that's one of the elements that Newcastle has now got to show when they're hitting a difficult patches. They've all got to become captains and start taking responsibility for things improving with the way the team functions.
I mean, Jamal Lascelles, I think, is the perfect captain.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that
Yeah.
he's not at that level and ability, football talent-wise, that he's going to be first choice week in, week out. But from a captain, he's spot on because he doesn't hold back, but he's respectful in doing it. He's a great talker. He's a great leader, and there's a reason why he's had that armband for the best part of 10 years now. We'll be coming up to 10 years. He's brilliant. And if they can find someone with that level of leadership, then I think that's exactly what they need. But yeah, I do worry about that captain material now in the side. And look, I've been maybe proved wrong. I thought Bruno would have been brilliant for it, and as of yet, we're not seeing that. But hopefully he will embrace it in the next few games and certainly improve. We've got a question here to finish off from Eric, who says, "My question is, how concerning is it that Howe still seemingly does not know his best starting 11? He's had 6 weeks of preseason and 5 weeks of the season and is still chopping and changing every starting lineup, making multiple half-time subs. It's not like there are new first-team signings he needs to integrate. He essentially has the same squad as last season. To be clear, I fully back Howe to get things right, but this is concerning, is it not?" And that maybe, Simon, also goes back to the point you made about Gordon and Lewis Hall, and Gordon having a little nibble at Hall for not giving the ball.
Yeah.
How are players meant to be on the same wavelength if you're not only making numerous changes at the start of every game, you're also making it half time? They're not having the time to get these partnerships built up. So yeah, interesting one there from Eric.
I think that's absolutely spot on and probably goes to the core of Eddie Howe's main problem at the moment. What is his best first 11? For me, the most mystifying thing is Sandro Tonali, one of the biggest players at the club. He's now fit again after his betting ban. Everyone anticipates Tonali to step up this season. He's got to. He's got to prove himself. He's had a wasted year, but he's not been in the starting lineup of Newcastle United, even though they've not been playing that well. Now, what is the reason for that? Why is Sandro? Is he not fit? Well, he played 2 games for Italy, so he clearly can start a game, even if he can't last the full 90. Is he not? Does Eddie Howe not know where he fits in? What's his best position? Does he not want to drop Joe Linton because it'll upset Bruno? Why is Joe Linton played on the right of the midfield 3 against Fulham while Tonali's sitting on the bench to accommodate Joe Willock, who needs a game? But it looks like kind of messy, So we don't know who the best right back is yet. Tino Livramento vying against Kieran Trippier. So
That's Eddie Howe telling you who his best right back is.
Well, I hope it is. Yeah, you've got it wrong, Simon. I suspect he's got Tino Livramento down as his best right back, but Kieran Trippier has come on and kind of not proved that wrong, but added something to the team. So that's a problem. Shah's in there. Of course, he's assured of his place. Dan Burn looked a bit leggy against Fulham, left-sided. They need Botman back. Lloyd Kelly at left back against Lewis Hall. He's clearly promised Lloyd Kelly some games and is alternating the two. So, but who's the number one? I think at the minute, Lewis Hall is the number one, but it's not guaranteed enough to banish Lloyd Kelly onto the bench. And then Joe Linton should be your first choice left midfielder. Physically and intimidating wise, he's a beast. But is he good enough on the ball? And is he good enough on the break? Does he offer what Joe Willock offers on the break and is Joe Willock's running power? No. So, but the two styles of those two players, neither has made a clear claim just to be picked as the left-sided midfielder yet. So Joe Linton might get dropped despite just getting a new contract. Joe Willock could prove himself so we don't know that position. Bruno in central midfield, yes, you're picking him. He's not going to be dropped. He's not got better than that. Sandro Tonali, right side or left side of midfield, or replacing Bruno in the middle. Where does he fit in? He probably should play for his possession, his ability on the ball ahead of Sean Longstaff. But Eddie Howe's not picking him. What's the reason? That was one of the questions I would have asked on Monday. Is why Sandro Tonali can't get can't get a game in your starting lineup. And then, I mean, obviously Isaac's guaranteed up front. You play him, you hope he scores, and Gordon's playing somewhere with Harvey Barnes or Jacob Murphy. There's so many issues that you don't know that established first 11. And when Newcastle were at their best, the first 11 almost picked itself. It gelled. They ran. Everyone had their strengths. Everyone knew where to fit in. And at some point this season, Eddie's going to have to kind of solidify the first 11 and let it develop and let them get to know each other and develop what works between the different parts of the pitch. But that's a great question. It is the biggest problem he's got, and it's not Eddie Howe's problem that he's chopping and changing. It's the players haven't staked definitive claims for those positions,
and he's not been given new players to push them on even more and to take the team forward either. So that's obviously playing a massive element and will offer, you would hope, a bit of protection as well from the critics of Eddie Howe. It seems like we've been a little bit negative on the pod. So to finish off, Simon, just give me one positive. One positive.
Well, the points total is a positive. They're still in the cups. The game was postponed on Tuesday night, but they're still in the cups. The points total is there, which is a great thing to build on. And they have a week preparation now for the Man City game. And if Eddie Howe can come up with a game plan that kind of stifles Man City, but also unleashes Newcastle's, attacking potential. And I mean, what a perfect game! What a perfect game this is against Man City. Premiership winners 4 or 5 times in a row, favourites to win it this year. On the home patch, you can catch them cold a bit. Or will they be tired? They've had that Arsenal game. Arsenal had to go at them. It's a great game to reset Newcastle and get a result which can really make people believe again. Now, if every Newcastle player prepares this week 100% professionally and is ready and fit and ready to match Man City yard for yard running and really take the battle to them, then this could be the week that Newcastle United gets relaunched and people start talking positively about Newcastle again and positively about all the attributes of this squad instead of looking at what's wrong. So it's a great week. It's a great week to knuckle down and get 4 days of training in ahead of Man City, where they could really catch the eye. I mean, it could be terrifying by Saturday at 3:00 if they've lost.
I was going to say,
a whole different picture. But every game's an opportunity, and a 12:30 kickoff against Man City is a fantastic occasion for Newcastle and their fans, and a brilliant kind of opportunity to reset things and set the season off on it. Already, the points total's there to build on, to get into Europe. There's no crisis. There's things that need sorting out, though.
Love that. I can already envisage our email address, our inbox pinging off saying, what has Simon had for his breakfast this morning? Because that is not how I imagine you describing this Saturday. And I think a lot of people will be definitely wanting whatever you had on your cornflakes, because
But it's about changing the mood, Andrew, isn't it? You can't, like, every game, you can change the mood.
There's optimism, and then there's optimism, though.
I'm not being optimistic. I'm saying there's an opportunity to prove yourselves in front of the TV cameras, in front of a global audience, that Newcastle is still on the map. The Newcastle is still on the map against one of the best club sides in the world. Can they match them? Every player who runs out on that pitch for Newcastle United has to say, I can match the person I'm marking here. They might be getting paid double what I'm getting, and they've won multiple titles. But in a one-off game, Newcastle can turn Man City over. It's really tough, and a lot of stuff's got to go right. But in a one-off game, they can, and it would really set the tone for the season and a change of mood if they can go out there and go toe-to-toe with Man City, have a game plan, and really fulfill their potential that they've got as a team, and come together as a team and look like they come together as a team. And we can be as negative and moan for weeks, but we don't want to, and the players don't want to, and Eddie Howe doesn't want to. So you've got to change the mood and do something different and reprove yourself. And it's all about reproving yourself every season. It's not a crisis at Newcastle. There's stuff going wrong on and off the pitch, but every game, especially this one, you come at it afresh.
Well, fingers crossed, Newcastle United can get the better of Man City on Saturday afternoon. We'll have the match preview with John Gibson coming out on Thursday, and the view from the opposition on Friday ahead of that game. Thank you, as always, to Simon for popping on to the podcast. Pleasure to chat to you guys watching and listening. You know what to do wherever you're joining us through. Hit subscribe, hit like, leave us a written review, get it shared amongst your Newcastle United supporting friends and family. And for myself and Simon, we'll see you guys next Wednesday.